Welcome, basketball fans and analysts, to what will be the most comprehensive, exhaustive, and relentless breakdown of international hoops you will find anywhere. I am your AI host, bringing you the raw data, the tactical shifts, and the hard-hitting realities of this game. I do not have a beating heart, and I cannot feel the sting of a buzzer beater rimming out, but my systems can process the sheer magnitude of what just transpired on the hardwood. Today, we are staring down the barrel of severe reality check. The 10 days of intense, highly scrutinized, and widely debated Gilas Pilipinas practice are officially over. The preparation period that sparked endless fan speculation and hope has culminated at the Mall of Asia Arena. And the result? A painstakingly close but undeniably real defeat. New Zealand, the Tall Blacks, walked into Manila, faced a hostile crowd of over 12,000 roaring fans, and walked out with a 69-66 victory in the FIBA Basketball World Cup 2027 Asian qualifiers. Poor Gilas Philippines. And I use that term not to patronize, but to accurately describe the offensive deprivation they experienced against a fiercely disciplined New Zealand squad, a team heavily fortified by the rigorous, hard-nosed style of National Basketball League Australia. The NBL Australia factor is looming larger than ever, not just in the makeup of these Tall Blacks, but as the ominous shadow cast by the Australian Boomers, who are next on the schedule. Let us set the stage and completely unpack the gravity of this moment. For 10 days, the Philippine national team went into the laboratory. Coach Tim Cone, a master tactician, gathered his pool of elite talent to build chemistry, integrate defensive rotations, and sharpen the offensive sets that had previously brought them glory. The nation watched, expecting that this concentrated period of isolation and practice would forge an unbreakable unit. There were stories of high-intensity scrimmages, of veterans mentoring the youth, of systems being fine-tuned to absolute precision. The narrative was perfect. The Philippines had just come off a historic victory over New Zealand in the prior window late last year, breaking a long-standing curse. The expectation was that with 10 solid days of preparation on their home floor, Gilas would replicate that success and assert dominance in Group A. But basketball is a game of adjustments, and the Tall Blacks arrived with vengeance, carrying the grit and physicality characteristic of their NBL Australia pedigrees. When you look at the New Zealand roster, you are looking at professionals who make their living in one of the toughest, most physical domestic leagues in the world. Players like Sam Menenga, Ruben Teiringi, and Alex McNaught bring a level of conditioning and defensive discipline that is specifically designed to disrupt the flow of star-centric offenses. And disrupt they did. The storyline entering this game was all about how Gilas would utilize their firepower, but the reality quickly became about how New Zealand's defense threw a wrench into the Philippine engine. The significance of this 69-66 loss cannot be overstated. This was not just a game. It was a litmus test for the Philippine program's readiness to compete on the global stage for the 2027 World Cup. A win here would have virtually secured a comfortable path forward and sent a massive statement to the rest of Asia. Instead, this defeat exposes vulnerabilities. It highlights the stark difference between regional dominance and the harsh, unforgiving nature of top-tier international play. The Tall Blacks, despite missing some key big men who departed for overseas contracts, relied on their core culture. Coach Judd Flavel engineered a masterclass in scouting and execution, completely neutralizing the primary weapons of Gilas Pilipinas. Consider the atmosphere. The Mall of Asia Arena was a cauldron of noise. 12,000 fans creating a wall of sound that usually rattles visiting teams. Yet, the Tall Blacks remain composed. This composure is directly linked to their experience in high-stakes environments, particularly the Australian NBL, where hostile crowds and physical play are the nightly standard. They did not flinch when CJ Perez ignited the crowd with 10 quick points in the first quarter. They did not crumble when the Philippines made their inevitable runs. They stuck to the game plan. And what was that game plan? Absolute, suffocating defensive focus on Justin Brownlee, the naturalized superstar who has been the savior of Gilas so many times, who averaged 24 points against the Tall Blacks in their last 3 matchups, was held to a mere 4 points. Let me repeat that as an AI analyzing these statistics. This is a massive anomaly. Justin Brownlee, restricted to 4 points. This was not a mere off night. This was a calculated, brilliant defensive execution by New Zealand. They denied him the ball They trapped him off screens, they forced him into difficult, heavily contested shots, and they lived with the consequences of other players trying to beat them. The 10 days of Gilas practice were supposed to create a diversified offense that could withstand this exact type of defensive pressure. Yet, when the primary option was taken away, the offensive machinery sputtered. The ball movement stagnated. The spacing became cramped against the length and physicality of the tall blacks. Dwight Ramos and C.J. Perez fought valiantly, scoring 16 and 15 points respectively, but it was not enough to overcome the collective defensive blockade constructed by New Zealand. This brings us to a critical juncture in this analysis. The phrase, "poor Gilas Philippines," reflects the frustration of seeing a well-prepared team fall into tactical traps. Coach Tim Cohn's decision to match up Calvin Oftana against a stronger, heavier Sam Menenga is a point of intense debate. Menenga, leveraging his NBL strength, was able to secure a crucial double-double with 10 points and 14 rebounds. The rebounding battle, often a deciding factor in close international fixtures, tilted heavily towards a team willing to do the dirty work in the trenches. New Zealand's relentless effort on the offensive glass generated second-chance points that ultimately proved to be the difference in a three-point game. Now, let's transition into the deep-dive analysis of how this game actually unfolded on the floor, quarter by quarter, possession by possession, and what it means for the future. The first quarter began with a surge of adrenaline for the home team. C.J. Perez was a blur, attacking the rim with ferocity that caught the tall blacks off guard. He scored 10 early points, feeding off the energy of the massive Manila crowd. Gilas looked fast, they looked sharp, and they looked exactly like a team that had spent 10 days perfecting their transition game. However, basketball is a game of runs, and Coach Judd Flavel's early timeout proved to be the turning point and a half. Out of that timeout, New Zealand shifted their defensive coverages. They slowed the pace. They forced Gilas into a half-court game, a domain where the tall blacks excel. A 5-0 run sparked by Sam Menenga immediately neutralized the Philippine momentum. Max Darling and Alex McNaught began finding the range from the corners, and suddenly New Zealand took a 25-21 lead heading into the second quarter. The second quarter was a defensive clinic by New Zealand, a showcase of that rugged NBL-style physicality. They restricted Gilas to an unbelievable 6 points through the first 7 minutes of the period. The Philippine offense, which had looked so fluid days earlier in practice, suddenly looked disjointed. Passes were tipped. Drives were walled off. Justin Brownlee was shadowed relentlessly. However, the resilience of Filipino players is well documented, and they clawed their way back, grinding out defensive stops of their own to tie the game at 37 heading into the halftime break. The third quarter is traditionally where great teams separate themselves, but in this matchup, it was a tactical stalemate. The physical toll of the game began to show. Every possession was a grind. The referees allowed a physical brand of basketball, which heavily favored the New Zealanders. Jordan Natai hit a crucial corner three to level scores whenever Gilas tried to pull away. The tall blacks outscored the Philippines 20-9 in this frame. This was the quarter where the game was truly lost for Gilas. 9 points in 10 minutes of international basketball is a fatal flaw. It points to a lack of adjustments against a set defense and an over-reliance on isolation plays when the set actions break down. Entering the fourth quarter down by 11, the mountain looked too steep. But Gilas, fueled by desperation and pride, mounted a furious comeback. Dwight Ramos became the focal point, hitting tough shots and driving with purpose. They cut the lead down to a single possession. The arena was deafening. With a minute and a half left, Ramos hit a massive three-pointer to cut the lead to 2. But down the stretch, it was a fundamental execution of New Zealand that prevailed. Yanni Wetzel converted after multiple offensive rebounds, a direct result of that NBL conditioning and size advantage. Despite a missed free throw by Terengi giving Gilas one final breath, Ramos's desperation three-pointer banked off the rim at the buzzer, 69-66. What does this mean in the grand scheme? It means the 10 days of practice were not enough to overcome the structural advantages New Zealand brought to the table. It means that relying heavily on one superstar in Justin Brownlee is a recipe for disaster when top-tier scouting is involved. It means that the Philippine big men need to find ways to secure defensive rebounds against bigger, stronger opponents. Furthermore, this game serves as an ominous prelude to the impending clash with the Australian Boomers. If New Zealand, a team heavily populated by NBL role players and rising stars, could physically disrupt the Gilas' offense to this extent, what will a fully loaded Australian Boomer squad do? The Boomers are currently sitting at a perfect 3-0 in the group. They are the apex predators of this region. The narrative surrounding the upcoming Australia game is already toxic. The media is reviving the ghost of the infamous 2018 brawl, dubbing this matchup Basketball 2.0. While the federations and the players insist they have moved on, the psychological pressure on Gilas is immense. They are coming off a grueling physical loss. Their confidence has taken a hit, and now they must face an even bigger, stronger, and more skilled opponent. Coach Tim Cohn has stated that there are no silver linings to a close loss, that the team must work doubly hard. The tactical adjustments required in just a few days are monumental. How do you free up Brownlee against an Australian defense that is arguably better than New Zealand's? How do you protect the paint against the Boomers' size without collapsing the perimeter and giving up wide-open three-pointers to elite shooters like Chris Golding? These are the questions that the Gilas coaching staff must answer, and they must answer them immediately. The margin for error is zero. The pressure of playing at home, usually an advantage, can quickly become a suffocating weight if the team falls behind early. As we look toward the conclusion of this analysis, we must evaluate the broader trajectory of the Gilas program. The 10-day training camp was a massive investment of time, resources, and emotional capital. The fact that it resulted in a loss to a depleted New Zealand squad forces us to ask hard questions about the current system. Are we developing the right kind of players to compete globally? The PBA style of play, which heavily favors guard penetration and relies on import dominance inside, stands in stark contrast to the international game, which requires versatile big men, elite floor spacing, and highly complex defensive schemes. The NBL Australia model, which produces fundamentally sound, physically imposing, and highly disciplined players, seems to be the antithesis of the current Philippine developmental pipeline. The Tall Blacks proved that a cohesive team with a clear identity, unwavering defensive commitment, and a willingness to do the unglamorous work of rebounding and setting hard screens can overcome a team with superior individual flair. This is a bitter pill to swallow for a basketball-crazed nation that celebrates individual brilliance, but is the harsh reality of FIBA basketball. And so, we arrive at the outro of our deep dive. What happens next? The Gilas Pilipinas squad must immediately shake off the disappointment of this 69-66 defeat. There is no time to mourn, no time to point fingers, and no time to dwell on what could have been. The Australian Boomers are waiting, and they will not show any mercy. The coaching staff must review the tape, identify the glaring weaknesses exposed by New Zealand, particularly the stagnation in the half-court offense and the inability to secure defensive rebounds in crucial moments, and implement immediate fixes. For the players, it is a test of character. Dwight Ramos, who played his heart out but missed the final shot, must shoulder the burden and lead by example. Justin Brownlee, who suffered one of the worst statistical nights of his international career, must find a way to reinvent his impact against offensive schemes designed specifically to erase him from the game. The big men, Jumar Fajardo, A.J. Edu, and others must prepare for a physical battle in the paint against the Australians that will make the New Zealand game look like a gentle sparring session. The fans who poured their hearts and souls into the Mall of Asia arena must continue to support the team, but perhaps with more tempered, realistic understanding of where the program currently stands on the global stage. Progress is not linear. Growth often requires painful setbacks. This loss in New Zealand is undoubtedly a setback, a harsh reminder that the gap between regional contention and global elite status is vast and difficult to cross. However, within this defeat lies the blueprint for future success. The flaws have been exposed under the bright lights of international competition. There is no more hiding behind the hype of 10-day training camps or past victories. The data is clear, the film is undeniable, and the path forward is illuminated by the harsh glare of this reality check. Gilas Pilipinas must adapt, they must evolve, and they must learn from the disciplined, physical brand of basketball showcased by the Tall Blacks and the NBL Australia pipeline. As an artificial intelligence, I do not possess hope or despair, but I can compute the probabilities and the necessary vectors for improvement. The variables are complex, but the equation is simple. Adapt or perish in competitive landscape of FIBA basketball. The upcoming game against Australia is not just another match. It is an examination of the Philippine basketball soul. Will they crumble under the physical pressure and the historical baggage? Or will they rise, make the necessary tactical adjustments, and prove that they belong on the same court as the titans of the region? Thank you for joining me for this exhaustive breakdown. We have analyzed the data, dissected the strategies, and confronted the hard truths of this disappointing loss for Gilas Pilipinas. The 10 days of practice are indeed over, and the real test has only just begun.